On every trip that I took to Israel, to the Holy Land, the day that we went to Mount Tabor to talk about and celebrate the Transfiguration was always a great day for me. It was such a fantastic experience, especially on several occasions when I was able to climb the mountain, so to speak. We didn't literally climb the mountain, but walked up the road, up the paved road to the top. At the top there is a church that was built over the ruins of a church, that dated all the way back to about the 4th century. And there was a monastery, a Franciscan monastery there. But I tell you, climbing the road, one thing, you had to watch out for the taxi cabs because they were no holds barred, coming and going, and you literally had to plaster yourself against the side of the mountain. I can't imagine that the disciples and Jesus had to worry about that, but modern pilgrims do. And by the time we got to the top, I remember the first time, and every time that I did it, people said, well, why do we have to go to the top of the mountain? Why can't these things happen down in the valley? And I always ask that. Why mountaintops? Why do we have to go up there? And by the time you get there, you're almost 2,000 feet above sea level. And on any given day, you could see almost all of the Esdraelon Valley, which is one of the most fertile valleys in the Middle East. And you could see for miles and miles. This mountain almost stands solitary in the middle of that valley, so it's very prominent and stands out. But this one particular trip, it was in February, so kind of like we had just a couple of weeks ago, that kind of weather. And I woke up in the morning and I went, oh no, it's cloudy, it's foggy. People aren't going to have, and I just got really bummed about the fact that it was such an awful day. And I kind of grumped and griped the whole way and apologizing to everybody because I had built them up to this wonderful, glorious experience, and you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. That's how dense the fog was. And the whole time, and I was just kind of depressed about it, so I kind of, then you kind of just have to force yourself to go through the motions because it just wasn't the same. That I had always had such great experiences, and today it was like I was sad for the people because we weren't going to get to experience it like that. And so I did my customary, we did a little service, we read the scriptures, and in my word to them I kept saying, well, if it would have been clear, or if it would have been this, or if it would have been that. Don't we find ourselves sometimes in life saying that? Well, if this, or if that, because maybe the current place that you find yourself is really not where you want to be, or where you would like to be, and so it's always what if, what if, what if, what if. Anyway, and so I was just kind of very discouraged about the whole thing. Would you believe that by the time we had come out of the church, there was not a single cloud in the sky? And I stood at the entrance of the church, and I'm sure I was yelling, but I said, my God, it makes sense! And of course, everybody is looking at me like he had gone absolutely Looney Tunes because I was just so excited. It made absolute sense at that point, and here's how it made sense. That we find ourselves often in fog, in clouds, where we can't see our hand in front of our face. And sometimes life is like that. And the journey that we're on, we're just hoping for the cloud to lift. And there it was. The clouds had lifted, and it was a bright, glorious. You could see it was crystal clear across the valleys. It was incredible. I knew right then what this story was about. Imagine, this was like my 10th time going there, and after 10 times, this one finally made sense. That the Transfiguration, you see this text that we have today, that right before this text comes the first prediction of Jesus' suffering and death. And you can imagine how the disciples must have felt. Where what? We thought you were going to bring God's kingdom. We thought you were going to do all these wonderful things, and we've begun to see them. You're healing the sick and bringing sight to the blind. You're lifting up the lowly. You're doing these great things. And now you tell us that you're going to have to go away. You're going to suffer and die. Maybe can we choose somebody else to follow? Is there another Messiah out there? Because this ain't the guy that we want. We don't want somebody who's going to end this journey not in some glorious, amazing establishment of God's kingdom. We don't want somebody who's going to suffer and die on the cross. And of course, if you remember that text, and we'll have it in another week here in the service, of course the text says, Peter says, he voices it for all the rest of us. That ain't the guy we want. We don't want a Messiah that's going to suffer and die. We want somebody glorious. We want somebody who's going to lift us out of our dirt and clear away the fog in our life. We don't want somebody who's going to end it all on the cross. And Jesus rebukes him in the strongest language you can ever imagine. And Jesus then says, this discipleship thing that I'm calling you to isn't easy. This discipleship that I'm leading you to understand what it's all about is a discipleship that means taking up the cross. Just like the song that we sang before the reading, the rugged cross. And none of us want to think about having to spend our life committed to the suffering and dying, to the cross itself. None of us want that. And Jesus says you can't get there without that. And so here we are this day, knowing what's coming in the 40 days of Lent, where each Sunday we will journey closer and closer to the cross. And at times in that journey, we all in our fogginess want to say, that ain't for me. I'm not committing to that way of life. I don't want that. What's the bottom line? What's the easiest way to get there? And so Lent is a journey that reminds us that each and every day we're being shaped and formed more fully and more completely by Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. And so Transfiguration says, guess what? Guess what you're going to get at the end of the journey? The cross? Yes. But guess what? By the time you get to the cross, you will be so transformed and so transfigured that it won't matter what the suffering and death is about. Because your lives will already be filled with such power and such glory in terms of God's love and justice and mercy and compassion that it won't matter how much you suffer. Because you will be transformed and transfigured. And today we get a little taste of that. Just enough. So that as we make that Lenten journey, that sweet taste, that great taste, think about the taste that you have that doesn't go away in the best sense of the word. The finest wine, the best steak, the greatest fish, whatever it might be, that little taste, right, is always there on the tip of your tongue, in the back of your mouth, filling your whole body. Today is that little piece that we get, so that as we go through this journey, we are indeed being transfigured and transformed. And at the heart of it, and this is what that day on that experience, that we went up in the fog, and I could just imagine, it says in the story that a cloud had come over them, and it was like I didn't see it at the beginning. The cloud came over them, and I went, oh my gosh, we're in the cloud. And the voice comes, and the voice says, this is my son, the beloved. And you know what that's meant to say, not just in terms of Jesus, but it's meant to say it to each and every one of us. We're the beloved of God. We're the beloved sons and daughters of God. Why? Because if we're already committed to Jesus and joined ourselves to the one who is the beloved Son of God, not in a divinity kind of way, but if we are joined to Jesus, then every single one of us, even in the midst of our fog, are beloved sons and daughters of God. And I finally got that. And then to come out of the church and the clouds are lifted. You know what I really saw? The glory and majesty of God's creation. There, always before me, always before us, is the glory and majesty of God's creation. And we just let the fog blind us to see that. So that in coming to recognize the glory and the majesty of God's creation, seeing Jesus transformed, standing with two of the great people of the Hebrew Scripture, Moses and Elijah, the two who did see God face to face. There it is. We see God face to face, and we recognize the divine presence in creation. And so when we go through the sufferings and the struggles and the blindnesses and the deafnesses, guess what? Those words will always be at the back of our heads, in the front of our heads, in our mouth. You are my beloved son and daughter. In you I am well pleased. There it is. So, the journey begins. Keep this picture of today's story in your hearts, in your lives, in your minds, so that it can percolate, not inside, but begin to percolate so that outside we are transformed and changed. And guess what? The world around us begins to reflect more of God's majesty and glory, transforming and changing suffering and death into life.